There we go, thank you, Jess. First of all, a little introduction to Project Artworks. So Project Artworks is based in Hastings, and we are a collective of neurodivergent artists working locally, nationally and internationally. A key aim is to increase visibility for people with complex support needs in arts and culture and the civic landscape. And in order to do this, we work very closely with individuals, carers, families and circles of support in order to engage people in the studio as well. This is vitally important, that we have an understanding of the needs that people with complex support needs bring with them, and this includes bringing together a circle of support, which is the support collective, to navigate some of the complexities of care and the systems of support within social care and health services. We run online meetups and also more specific training and events throughout the year. It's great to see some familiar faces this morning from the collective. So this summit series is an online series of webinars designed to platform and showcase examples of specialist housing and support locally and in other regions of the country. We hope to learn from these examples and develop more innovation locally and start some bigger conversations about housing, accommodation and support. So a little bit of background to the summit. We at Project Artworks within the Support Collective have a programme called Planning Alternative Tomorrows with Hope. And the acronym we use for this is PATH. And some of the images that you will see in the screensaver in front of you are images selected from examples of person-centred plans that we have been working with individual artist makers from the collective and their families on. And crucially in these paths is the conversation about housing for the future. And what we do over a period of 2 workshops is map out long-term aspirations and goals for people with complex support needs and their families. And almost always the spotlight falls on accommodation and where are we going to live? Where's our loved one going to live in the future once family members are no longer here? We felt that a summit series was wholly necessary to support the families and carers that we're engaging with, to see the different models that are out there and where the gaps are, and more crucially, think about how we can collaborate and come together. So I'm really pleased to welcome our speakers this morning who have innovated models of person-centred housing and support locally. First up, we have Paul Colley, who is an artist and photographer, part of the Project Artworks collective, joined by his support team, which includes Kate Adams, Director of Project Artworks, Daniel Marshall, Specialist Senior Support Worker. We'll then be followed by Carol Wakeford, who is a service manager and mother to musician and performer Daniel Wakeford over in Brighton. We'll take a 5-minute comfort break at 12, and then we'll be hearing from Chris Brooks and Dion Downs from Support for Independent Living in Hastings. We'll then host a Q&A with the panel, so if you have some questions that arise from the presentations this morning, please paste those questions into the chat. You can find the chat at the bottom of your screen. There's a call out symbol with a speech mark. If you click on the chat and select your questions to go to Sarah Dunn. So I've got a few colleagues in the room today. Helen, Director of Development, Sarah Dunn, who has taken over the role of leading the support collective, and Jess, Communications Manager. So if you could send your questions to Sarah Dunn in the chat, we will then work through some of those questions with our panel of speakers. If we don't get through them all, we'll definitely be using them to structure our next sessions and fill in some of those gaps. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing my screen now and hand over to Paul, Kate and Daniel.
Hello, hi everyone. Can you hear us? Are we single screen or multiple screens? I can't tell.
Jess is going to spotlight you, so you're going to be the main screen.
Okay. Hi. Hello. So this is Paul, and this is Dan. Hi. And I'm Kate, and I'm Paul's mum. I am part of his support team, but I'm also his mum. And over here we have Kevin and Paolo. Hello. And Paul may or may not stay whilst we're doing this, and if he wants to leave, he will, won't he? So we put together a very brief PowerPoint. I'll just check it's the one thing open. Yep. We will. We thought it would be quite nice just to talk through where we are. This is Paul's home that you've lived in for about a year, 18 months now, maybe.
Yeah, September 2020, isn't it?
Yes. So we'll get to that in a moment. So I'm going to share my screen. Here we are. So where are we? Play from start. So can you see that okay? So this is Paul as a boy. That's you, Paul, when you were young. I show you this just because it's cute, really, bottom line. And this is Paul when he was 19. And this is very near, this in the background is very, very near where he lives now, strangely. So I just thought it was quite an interesting photo to show you. In 2002, Paul left school, and we were interested, weren't we, Paul, in trying to, in your life, right the way through, right from a small child, we wanted to maintain a level of control over the quality of his support and also his environment, because Paul's environment is incredibly important in maintaining and managing his well-being. And that's the physical environment as well as the sort of attitudinal environments of spaces, home and wherever he is. You do chip in, Dan. If
I certainly will.
Okay. And in 2008, we ran, actually, just to say, in 2002, when you left home, the only option available to us then, because there were no direct payments for people who lacked mental capacity until 2008, after the Mental Capacity Act. So we had to find a way of managing his budget outside of the local authority, and we did that through Care for the Carers, who very helpfully ran a service for supporting people to manage their budgets, and we commissioned an outreach service from Autism Sussex, and that's when we met Dan and other people who came to us actually from that provision, some of whom are still here with Paul, which is an incredibly important aspect of the quality of his life. In 2008, we met Dan, and we also did a path, and this path identified, I tidied it up because I couldn't manage with the very messy sheet that we produced. So we did actually keep the North Star, and the North Star, we did this in July 2008, the path, didn't we, Paul? And we had a goal of 5 years, well, 3 years, in fact. We said that in 3 years' time, in 2011, you'd be living in your own home. In the end, it actually took us 11 years to get to that point, but we worked backwards, and there were multiple things, stingers in the path, weren't there?
What do you think was the hardest bit of, that the start of that idea to when it actually happened? What was the sort of?
I think really it was stabilizing, to bring together a team that could support Paul and had real skill, and also to get to a point where we had a provision that felt stable enough for Paul to be able to have independence and the sort of intimate knowledge, I suppose, and skill.
Because that's part of what happens when you take on these provisions, isn't it? You're relying on good recruitment, and that's up to you. You're recruiting people, and sometimes they may not work out. And that can be really unstable for a long time. So to do that while you're in your own place without maybe the support of a residential service. So there's definitely challenges there, isn't there? Like living in your own place, because you are reliant on yourselves.
Absolutely. And we sort of worked towards that. But what happened in the year straight after was in 2009, Paul's social worker at the time did a checklist for continuing healthcare, and he was essentially, what happened is you had an assessment, didn't you, for continuing healthcare, which you failed.
Don't worry, I've never been good at tests either.
And then the adult social care contested that decision, and in fact in 2009 he did qualify for continuing healthcare. So that completely changed our plans, and in 2010 we were supported by the then Commissioner for Continuing Healthcare to set up a company in Paul's name, which we did. And that company, Paul Colley Company, started to held the budget from Continuing Healthcare. We signed a contract with the NHS, and then we started employing Paul's team directly. And that was quite stable, actually, for quite a long time. And we had to, there were lots of things that happened during that period, which I won't go into, but essentially we, myself and Paul's dad, we moved out of our own home for a while so that the team could begin to establish in 2012 a 24/7 provision to see how that would work. But we were there. So you were in the place, in the home you were born in for a long time, weren't you? 5 years, and then
we took it over, didn't we?
Yeah, and then Paul's sister Ruby took over the flat that we were living in then and had 2 babies. So we came home, not at the same time, but one after the other. And so we came back, and in 2016 we bought this old skanky wreck, wasn't it, Paul? And it's a house called Cliftonville, and this is the estate agent's pictures of it, and it looks a lot better than it was.
Didn't Tony call it Cliftonville for about 3 years?
Yeah, Cliftonville. And this is the old kitchen there, and this is the back garden. I'm just keeping an eye on the time. Why isn't that moving along? Oops. And this is a film I took soon after we'd moved in of the space that is actually the ground floor, essentially. And this was actually, this was Paul. This is what it was like, wasn't it? And
This is your bathroom, isn't it, Anne?
Yeah, and tell us what you were doing, Dan.
These walls were covered in lime plaster about an inch thick, which Tony told me to cold chisel off, which took about 2 weeks, and my shoulder still hurts every time I see this video. And that was after we'd spent 2 days in a 3/4 height basement cleaning out mud and spiders.
Yeah, that's right. We did a team day with Paul's team, because when we actually got the keys to this place, we realised that it had a basement that was the entire footprint of the house, but it's only about 1.5 meters, 1.4.
I was surprised I had to duck down.
Yeah,
but
and it's basically a flood basement, and so we realised as well that during the first winter that it floods at high tide in the spring tides, because the sea is only about 50 yards south. So this is the downstairs when it was in full adjustment mode. Is that playing okay?
Yeah, absolutely, Kate. It's fine, my end. Yeah.
And so, that was the living room, in which we're just sitting about here. In fact, that's where we are right now. And this is the back garden, and I was burning things. So there was a big garage here when we bought it, and it was full from floor to ceiling with horrible junk, which we had to clear out, and then we punched a hole in the side of the house and built an extension. This is Paul's dad, who imbued the entire house with 4 years of his life and a lot of love, didn't he?
He was there every day, wasn't he?
Yeah.
Was it 10 hours a day or something?
Yeah.
Full-time job.
And then just after we bought this, Paul, you had in 2017 a review, didn't you, Paul, of continuing healthcare review, and they decided to withdraw eligibility for his continuing healthcare package, which at that time was supporting the whole plan and your life, and a team of 8 people. Paul now has a team of 9 support workers, don't you? And the team actually has within it a structure. We have Dan, who's care plan manager.
Hello.
And Paolo, who is senior support worker and administrator. So this helps the structure of the provision in this space. But anyway, what we then had to do in 2017 is appeal. And we took on, it was very, very onerous, and that whole process of withdrawal of continuing healthcare happened to a lot of people within East Sussex. And it was a really pernicious and disturbing period of time. We felt very insecure. Adult social care did pick up the package in full for a certain amount of time, but then started cutting it. So in the end, we got legal support through legal help via, you didn't you, Paul, from solicitors, and we took it to an independent review panel with the NHS England, who found the original review that was done in 2017 unsound and reinstated eligibility. So we're back on track. And then in September 2020, Paul moved in. And these are some contemporary photos of the upstairs of the house. These are the bathroom shots that were those horrible environments. And this is the top back room where I stay when I come. And I thought I'd do you a little run through of how it is this morning. So this is Paul's bedroom, which was the kitchen. And this is we're just about to go into the room where that Dan had to chip off the lime plaster. We still have quite a lot of work to do on the garden, and we're planning to do that this year and next year. We tried to replicate Paul's wet room that he has at our house that we built with a disabled facilities grant in 2006. We tried to replicate the space of that as closely as possible, so that the transitions were as easy as they could be. I'm just taking a little sort of film here. Hello, everyone. So this is the kitchen area now with this extension, and this is the front room area. And hello, Paul. And that's we're sitting at this kitchen table now, and so the house, you know, it works pretty well. It's actually quite hard. It's quite expensive, obviously, to run. I still have quite a big mortgage on this, and it's by no means a kind of, you know, the end game, is it? It's a stage, and one of the reasons we felt it was important to try and get hold of a property was to create a degree of financial and circumstantial stability for Paul, and we wanted to remain independent. And then just very lastly, these are the elements that we rely on to enable us to do this. So I have a deputyship in personal welfare and property and finance. Paul has housing benefit from the local authority, from Hastings Borough Council, which now enables him to put a proportion of income into the cost of the mortgage. He has support from his home via a personal health budget that is financed by continuing healthcare. He has a personal independence payment that supports all the expenses of food and so on. I support utilities still, although he does occasionally is able to put something into that, and Paul also has employment support allowance. And so that's where we're at.
Thank you so much, and it's incredible to see the transformation. I think we were just saying before we started the summit, we love a before and after. So thank you for doing that walkthrough. Also, it occurred to me that there's quite a lot of artwork at Project Artworks stacked behind me, and there's a lot of bare walls in your house, Paul. Are you waiting to select?
Well, we have an Albert, yeah, on the wall, and we could definitely do with some more, couldn't we, Paul? Would you like some more paintings? We commissioned Ellen for a painting of our yard that we have at home, which I've yet to put up here. But yes, this is true.
Oh, thank you so much for the potted history and all the twists and turns that you've had to navigate. I'm sure there'll be some questions from the group this morning, so do ask your questions in the chats by private messaging Sarah Dunn. We've already had one question through from Ali, and we'll keep that one for later. You mentioned very briefly about the mortgage and taking out a mortgage. Just so the group are aware, we are going to be hearing from My Safe Home in the next series, in the next webinar, and My Safe Home supports individuals with long-term disabilities to secure property on the open market and through shared ownership, and to secure a mortgage, which is interest only. So we'll be exploring some of the support out there for home ownership at the next session. Yeah, so any questions, message Sarah. Great to see you, Paul. Great to see Dan. Hello. You're enjoying that walkthrough. It must feel like such a fantastic environment for you, so bespoke.
I think Paul is very much enjoying living in your own home, aren't you? The dream is for Paul to have choice in every day about what he can do, so that it's not necessarily determined by a group. But I don't know how long we'll be able to maintain this. I'm hoping that we will find our way like we have for the last, Paul was 39, if you don't mind me saying, Paul, last month, and I'm hoping that we will always be able to support you to do this, and that we will probably expand the directorship of the company at some point, so that others will be able to carry it on.
Thank you so much, and I'm hoping, Kate, you'll be able to stick around, and we'll have some questions after our next speaker. Just to let you know, at 12 o'clock we'll take a 5-minute comfort break, and next to speak is Carol Wakeford, and Carol is another innovator and mother to Daniel Wakeford, who is a musician and performer about to record his second album, isn't it?
Second studio album, yes.
Second studio album. So a bit busy today in the studio, but yeah, it gives me great pleasure to welcome Carol. And Carol and I met for the first time maybe a few months ago,
Yes.
introduced via mutual friends and colleagues, and yeah, just heard about the fantastic work that you've done, and you've had to pivot massively to do what you've done for your son, as I'm sure is a recurring theme this morning. It's life-changing. So yeah, yes. Take it away, Carol.
Okay, well, hi, I'm Carol, and as Esther said, you probably may know my son Daniel. He was on 8 episodes of the Undateables, Channel 4's The Undateables, and from there they've showcased his music. He's gone on to have an album. He had one of his singles in the charts for 2 weeks on Spotify at #1. And on Saturday, we just done the Ryan and Clark Radio 2 show on Saturday afternoon. So it can still be caught if you want to get it on iPlayer. So he's a bit of a celebrity, my son. But to start from the beginning, Daniel has autism and associated learning disabilities and a profound speech and language disorder. And like Kate and Paul, we from the very beginning were determined that Daniel was going to live as independently as he possibly could, with all the opportunities and possibilities that his older sister Tanya has. How we were going to do this, we wasn't sure. It's very scary. But from the age of 8, Daniel part-boarded at specialised schools, first being Meath and then St Mary's, and then later on to their sixth form college. And he left there at the age of 19. We knew he wasn't ready yet for any kind of supported living independence then, but we wanted to find something that could be a good stopgap. And we actually found Outlook House on our doorstep, unbelievably, because we live in the Brighton area. And Outlook House was amazing. It was designed specifically for adults from the age of 19 to 25, and their aim was to teach their residents life skills and to enable a more independent life post 25. And I have to say, Daniel learnt some amazing skills and coping mechanisms that have definitely set him up to live the more independent life that he now enjoys. Whilst Daniel was at Outlook House, we considered trying to set up our own supported living house for when he eventually left Outlook. But we just didn't know where to start. We were hairdressers. The language was totally different to anything we'd come across before, and we just kept meeting, all kinds of barriers. But coincidentally, at the time, we met a couple who'd done just this for their daughter, and they offered to help us to set up our own house. So we started on this journey, and again, there were so many hurdles and hoops, and it soon became clear that this was not going to happen anytime soon. And eventually they came back to us and they said, look, what about if we open another house for Daniel and his friends and you can be involved? We jumped here, to be honest. We just thought this has got to be the answer. And so this is what we did. And it was fine for a while, but then about 8 months in, it wasn't too long, it became clear that their vision was not our vision. It wasn't as personal centered as we would like. And we could see that Daniel wasn't happy. On one Sunday morning, we picked him up and we took him out for breakfast and we got chatting. And he said, Mum, Dad, why can't you do the best friend's house? Because that's what Daniel always called his future house, the best friend house. And Barry and I looked at each other and we went, you know, we have to do this. And sorry, Barry's my husband. And we realised that in the process of Daniel moving into this other placement, we learned quite a lot. And we were starting to learn the language, the different aspects of it all. So we felt a bit more confident to approach the situation. Also, we've come quite close with a few of Daniel's support staff that had actually moved to the new provision with him. And there was 3 in particular that we were talking to who seemed to have the same vision as us. And they loved the idea of us setting up our own house. So we decided to approach them and see if they would like to join forces with us and become part of the support management team and company. And they were totally up for it. So we also spoke to Daniel's social worker at West Sussex, because Daniel was then supported by West Sussex and still is actually. And he was fully supportive of everything that we were trying to do. And basically, he helped us along our way and we were ready to go for it. So fortunately for us, Barry and I owned an apartment in Lancing, on Lancing Beach, that we rented out. So we put this up for sale. And whilst waiting for the flat to sell, we set up our own company and management team and started proceedings to obtain the care provider contract with Brighton and Hove Council. Again, there was many loops and hoops, but we had the right people at the right time, and many, many nights of eating pizza and drinking white wine and black coffee, we managed to put together everything that they required us to. But the biggest hoop of all was that the landlord and the support company cannot be the same person. Well, this causes a bit of a dilemma, but we decided that the only way around this was for Barry, my husband, to become the total sole owner of the house and the landlord, and I would head the support team. It was still touch and go. And at one point, we seriously considered getting divorced. We would have stayed together. There would have been no doubt about that. But if we'd have got divorced, we would have been legally okay. But eventually Brighton and Hove come back and said, no, don't worry, it's fine. As long as you are separated, landlord is Barry and you are the support team, we're fine about that. And ironically, we was even able to employ Barry as a maintenance man within the house. That was fine. So basically I signed all my worldly goods over to Barry and he became the sole owner. And we were awarded the care project provider contract. And in January 2013, we got the good news, we'd sold our flat. So we were now in a position to go looking for the property, and we braced ourselves for a tough search because we had so many criteria we needed to fit. But unbelievably, 3rd house in, we found it. It had the bus stop opposite. It was less than 25 minutes to the town centre, and it was quite easily converted, I say that in brackets, into 4-bedroom, all with their own bathrooms, which was an absolute must for us. These are adults, they need to have their own privacy. So the house that we purchased was a 5-bedroom, 2-bathroom. But as I say, we, again, like Kate said, it was a doer-upper, definitely, but that suited us. And we've managed to work it with an architect that it could be quite easily converted to the 4-bedroom en-suites that we wanted. We eventually completed on the house sale in July 2013, and we gave ourselves a 6 weeks turnaround to complete the conversion. We hired in many trades, including Barry, who in his past life had been a builder. At the time, we owned our own hairdressing salon. And so we had to, and Barry was a full-time stylist within the salon. So we had to adjust our working week. And it ended up with Barry working 4 days a week in the salon as a stylist, 3 days at the house, and some evenings. And everything was going fine. Then 2 weeks before the move-in date, we had an attempted burglary. So therefore, Barry he took a blow-up mattress and he slept on the floor in the lounge for 2 weeks on this blow-up mattress amongst paint pots, cement bags and all sorts of other debris. It was quite tough going for a while. But eventually the big day came, mid-August 2013. Daniel and his 2 housemates, both girls, moved into their new house. On the first night, we did a celebratory barbecue. I can't tell you. We were emotionally wrung out and exhausted, and it was all so very surreal. We were joined in the barbecue with the new residents, their families, and the new staff team. We just sat there in a complete daze. It was amazing. We'd done it. The following year, we obtained our 4th residence, and for all intents and purposes, we were now complete. However, Dan had a best friend called Matt, who from the age of 5 had always talked about living in their best friend house when they grew up. But at the time of completing the house, Matt's mum didn't feel that Matt was ready, and Matt was very anxious about the move himself. He wanted to sort of sit and watch and see how it went. He needed that reassurance. So we always had a plan B in our minds. And in 2015, we built a small extension onto the front of our integral garage. This became our 5th bedroom and ensuite. And we're pleased to say that almost 2 years to the day of opening the house, Matt moved in. We were now complete, or were we? In 2019, we submitted plans for a large extension on the back of the house, giving us the 6th bedroom ensuite and much needed staff office. We also managed to create a large communal kitchen lounge diner, which worked so much better than the previous complicated layout that we had. We now have 6 residents, 2 men, 4 ladies, 9 staff and a dog called Paddy. Surely we're complete now. Maybe not. We have approached the neighbours and asked them if they are willing, if they ever want to move, would they give us first refusal on their house, and they have agreed and have said that that is what they want to do in the next couple of years. So we are sitting there, we have the ideas ready, and when they do eventually want to sell, we will be ready. I feel I need to mention to everybody that you don't need loads of money to do this. Yes, we have a big mortgage too, but there are several options open to everyone. You do not have to buy the property. There are landlords that will be happy to rent the property on a long-term basis. And there are many companies that are doing this. After the initial setting up, you can be involved as much or as little as you want to be. If you don't want to be involved in the support, bring in a support company to supply the support within the house. There are so many possibilities. And would I recommend this to other people? A big fat yes. It's our life now. We do not regret it. And we do not regret it. Absolutely not, we don't. In fact, it's the complete opposite. We love being involved and seeing Daniel and his housemates flourish. We also love the peace of mind that it brings us, knowing that long after we have gone, Daniel will be able to continue to live the good life that him and his friends now have and deserve. Okay, thank you for listening to me today. I hope I've inspired some of you and not scared any of you off. And I'm happy to answer any questions you may have later.
Carol, thank you so much for sharing your story. It's so inspiring, and the amount of physical exertion and emotional resource that your family have put into making sure Daniel could have his best friend house is just amazing. And I'm sure this will have provoked many thoughts and feelings within the group. So please send your questions to Sarah and we'll do our best to answer them. Some of the things that are cropping up and patterns from your presentation, Carol, and Paul, Kate and Daniel's is about this quality of environment and what you hold dear to you, as opposed to thinking about what is presented to you as the options and when you can neatly fit yourself into a box. And the idea of aspirations and creating a community around you, which you so clearly have done and made a massive adjustments to your career, yours and your husband's.
Yes.
So,
we're no longer hairdressers. We're no longer hairdressers. We became too involved. We couldn't do both.
Yeah. Wow. So we are a little bit ahead of schedule. So I'm going to give everyone maybe a 10 minutes comfort break. So put on the kettle, spend a penny and regroup at just before 12 o'clock. And we will hear from our next speakers, Chris Brooks and Dion Downs from Support for Independent Living. And yeah, get thinking of those questions too. Okay.
Thank you.
So welcome back, everyone. We are going to hear from Dion Downs and Chris Brooks from Support for Independent Living. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Chris, hi. You made it back. I'll just give you a few moments. Just make sure everyone's joining us. Okay, all right. Jessica, are you all right to spotlight Chris and Dion? I have you. Something wrong with my screen. Speaker view. Okay, maybe when they start talking, we'll be able to see. Okay, hi Dion, hi Chris.
Hello
Hi.
there, hey everyone.
Morning, thanks for
Can you
joining.
hear us okay?
Yeah, good, thank you. Looking forward to hearing your story. Take it away.
Yeah, well, basically we'll spend a bit of time explaining the sort of ethos of the supported accommodation that we manage and how it sort of works, I suppose. Chris is best positioned to talk about the more sort of personal side of setting up a supported accommodation as a parent of somebody with complex needs. So what we're sort of running is a supported accommodation household, enabling local neurodivergent adults to live a life more ordinary, independently in their own homes with personalised support. The house is called Support for Independent Living, and it's an opportunity that has been developed by a local parent of a young man with Down syndrome who aspires to live as independently as possible within his own home and community. He has a support plan which has been developed to meet his individual needs and aspirations. As a home, we're fully committed to the UN Convention of Human Rights, disability discrimination and development of inclusive communities, and we ensure our support work is guided by putting people first, making sure everything is person-centered and personalised to their lives individually.
Okay, and obviously putting people first sort of shows my age, even though I'm only obviously 21, as you can see. So basically, I am that parent that set up Support for Independent Living, and for me, the aspirations was for my son, who is now 37, to live as independently as possible, and also so that when I shuffle off my mortal coil at some point in the future, that his whole world doesn't fall apart. So the idea is that if he's living independently in his own home, then basically at my demise in the future, he's just got to deal with the loss of a parent rather than a loss of his whole world. So for me, that was really, really important. And I suppose, having listened to the other two presenters, which were very aspirational and inspirational and really, really cool, I suddenly thought that actually my presentation is probably a little bit different to yours. So I'm going to rejig, and I'm going to be on the I don't know how to say it. Anyway, I'll have it. Yeah, I'll change my tack slightly. So I set up the project in 2006, and that was after Grant had gone into shared lives, like everybody who's spoken before.
Grant is Chris's learning disabled son.
Thank you, Dion. It's a bit of teamwork here. So basically, when Grant left school at 19, he was quite independent. He was going to his local pub, and he's always grown up to be relatively independent, because for me it was really important. We had a project before that was after school and holiday schemes, which was all about creating inclusive communities and making sure that disability was brought into the mainstream. So that ethos was always really important to me. And so I always brought him up to be relatively independent anyway. By the time he left school, we sort of looked at what opportunities were available to him. And we explored some shared lives, homes. And shared lives is basically a project that's run by East Sussex County Council. I think they've got them all over the country. And basically the idea is that the person moves from the family home into a different family home. And so we looked at a few shared lives projects, and Grant moved into one of them. I think he was about 21 at the time. And yeah, he was actually tracking back. You see, this is where I haven't got it written down, so I'm doing it all off the hoof. So he moved into this shared lives placement, and you know, and it was a lovely place, and he was living with other people, a couple of peers, and it was quite different. But what I noticed sort of 6 months in was that he lost quite a lot of his independent living skills, and some of his enthusiasm for independent living as well. And that sort of concerned me. And it was really by accident that our next door neighbours were basically had their house on the market. And I persuaded my brother and my partner at the time to buy this property, because I didn't have any money. And I don't think I would have been able to get a mortgage on my own anyway. So they bought this property, that it was mortgaged. I hasten to add that they're not that loaded to have loads of money to buy a property. So we managed to buy the property, and like Carol, actually, we found that at the time the landlord had to be very separate to the care element, and we still run like that. We haven't set up as a company at all. I'm actually just a sole provider. No, sorry, I was a sole provider, and now Dion and I are in a partnership. So that's how our project started, really. The way I started it is I became approved through supported accommodation. So East Sussex County Council's supported accommodation as a supported accommodation provider rather than shared lives. And the good thing about our project is where I live next door, it's a really nice next step on from shared lives, where individuals live in families, which actually is you know, okay, it's a different family, but actually the same principles apply, in that those families and those carers are going to become older. And unless those people move on, then the same challenge occurs, in that, you know, when they shuffle off their mortal core, much the same as myself, Grant would then be left with his whole life being affected, rather than just his home, or sorry, just the loss of his carer or his parent, etc. And so we became supported accommodation providers, and that part of it was pretty straightforward. The process was pretty straightforward and quite fast. But then after we were approved, there was a distinct lack of East Sussex actually referring people. So we managed to get most of our people from for the house through the website, through our website, and had very little in the way of referrals through East Sussex County Council. And I think that East Sussex County Council didn't really see the potential for this being a really good move on project from somebody from Shared Lives becoming much more independent. And over the years, I think the bureaucracy just ended up getting on my nerves. And so in 2017, we became independent of supported accommodation. We're still approved through East Sussex County Council, and we have to basically renew our approval every 3 years, I think it is. But it just runs much smoother without the supported accommodation team. And I think now I'm going to move on to Dion and let him carry on.
Yeah, so the house it's got 4 residents living in it at the moment. And lots of communal space, including the kitchen and the living room. Just to give you a bit of an idea of what the house itself looks like. Everybody sort of shares the domestic chores that need doing throughout the week. You know, cleaning jobs and stuff, cooking. They also get supported with their sort of general living needs, like there's a whole list of things really that we might get to in a bit. But basically, yeah, the house is almost like the ethos is sort of like a group of friends living together and working together and learning together, basically. Some of the skills we sort of support the guys who are living there to develop are pretty vast. I've got a little list here that I might reel off a few things. Sort of developing personal safety skills, personalized independent living skills, working on their relationships, healthy eating, planning their meals for the weeks, accessing shops to get their shopping, support with cooking main meals and other meals, cleaning, recognizing maintenance and repair around the house, basically all of the sort of domestic jobs that everybody has to partake in life. The ethos is to get the residents of the house involved in as much of that as makes sense based on their individual capacities and abilities. Currently there are 4 neurodiverse individuals living in the house and developing their independent living skills together, with the support of a few members of staff, including myself, who comes in and usually works one-to-one with individuals, developing plans for new goals as goals are reached and met around just sort of general domestic things, and also accessing the community as well.
Things like events, really.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we explore their interests with them as well. Because I think what's sorry, I've butted in here.
That's okay.
But what's really important as well is that they are really active in their own communities, and they're accessing the same sort of things as their non-disabled peers. So things like your beer festivals, the carnivals, Pirates Day. One of them is really keen on Pirates Day, and he's got all his stuff set up and ready to roll. So it's really looking at all of those things.
Yeah, the individuals there enjoy a wide variety of music, from rock and pop, also going dancing, going to the cinema, pubs and clubs, Millie's Disco, which is a disco in Hastings. I know Carol is probably aware of the Blue Camel Club, which is like a similar neurodiverse disco that takes place in Brighton. A similar thing happens in Hastings, Millie's Disco. Playing pool, sort of local pubs and sports bars and stuff like that. Joining in lots of community-based groups, like sort of Samba Lanco drumming groups and things. Basically making sure all the residents have a really sort of key part in the community, where they're able to express themselves and feel included as much as possible. They all enjoy going on trips, so they're regularly supported to plan out sort of events outside of town as well. Obviously, COVID over the last 2 years has been very restrictive in terms of access to a lot of places for the guys who are living in support for independent living. Some of those individuals are clinically high risk, which does mean that some activities that might be available to others aren't necessarily for them at certain times. Fortunately, this year we're coming into a lot more freedom and accessing a lot more things, which is a great time for that.
I mean, in terms of the COVID, that's been a really interesting thing to be working with the guys on. And we've spent a lot of time sort of talking to them about COVID and the restrictions and all the rest of it, and also getting them to take some ownership over their own sort of responses to it and their own risk assessments for themselves. So they've actually decided to set up their own social group. And yesterday was the first day where they walked down into the old town and had a game of golf, and sort of well, basically acted like most tourists would act really, and had a great time. But they're going to be finding their feet back out in the community much more, and then starting to invite their own friends so that they can carry on meeting up with their friends. The previous social group in Hastings spent a lot of time in a dark, dingy Wetherspoons pub, and it would be from 10 till 3. With people sitting down, even on the glorious days, and they've got beaches, they've got the seafront, they've got all sorts of things. So to be stuck in a dark, dingy pub is always a bit of a shame. So they've decided that they want to do their own social group, which they're setting up now, which is predominantly outdoors and taking advantage of places like the pier and the various things that Hastings has got to offer. Next week we're off to the May Day thing, so that will be their first time in about 2 years actually of accessing the May Day festivities.
And for everyone else too.
Yeah, exactly. So where have we got to?
Well, I think we've pretty much sort of explained the general ethos of the business, and you've touched on a bit of the sort of the humble beginnings, and the more sort of personal side of setting provisions up, I suppose. I think for us as well, I mean, COVID's had quite a big impact, as it has on lots of people, in terms of our sort of future development. And one of the things that I would really like to see is that there's more opportunities out there for people to access independent living skills. So it could be that people could be helped much more with things like their cooking, their travel training, budgeting and money management. That's so keyly important for our guys. You know, how do they know if they've got the right change? And which is a really big challenge, but you know, you can make it easy for people, you know. And that's what we generally do. But it would be nice if we could get more people upskilled in the local community. So we're going to be looking at reintroducing that and trying to teach our local authority as well about the potential, and that people have the right to reach their full potential rather than just being placed somewhere and then sort of forgotten until the next review. And I think that might be it. Yeah, I was also going to add, maybe in terms of accessing, we sort of develop support plans that are used when it comes to the guys' reviews to a degree, to help demonstrate the support that they may need, in the hope that they can access more provision, you know. So we spend a bit of time just putting together information from working with the individuals, and having a sort of base of evidence that we can use to
make a case for their support.
Absolutely.
Well, one of the reasons that we did that is that we found that the local authority basically started to use copy and paste techniques into people's support plans. And so rather than it being having a foundational support plan that was then sort of reviewed, they would sort of, in some cases, start again because they didn't know the individuals. And so lots of information, sort of really key, vital information, was being lost. So we've taken that in hand, and then basically what we do is we provide a support summary that's linked to their support plan, we then send that to social services, and actually what they do is they copy and paste what we've written, but at least it's factually correct. Because one of the things that concerns me is if any of the guys go moving on, if that information is lost, you know, that's going to be really hard to retrieve.
Yeah, I'd say that's quite a key part of our ethos too, is to make sure people's needs are and information around what their need requirements are quite easily accessible and up to date, because we experience a lot of the opposite.
Exactly. And things change.
Absolutely. So. Yeah, and things are ever changing.
Absolutely. So, that's the only constant is change.
Absolutely, yeah. Other than that, I think that's all the information I've got to present.
Lovely. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. That's been so invaluable. I love how you kicked off your presentation talking about the Convention of Rights, the UN Convention of Human Rights, and how that underpins your service. And it's just incredible to hear two passionate people with incredible lived experience make a difference to your son and your brother's life and other people. It's incredible. You're creating exemplar support and care plans. You're paving your own way. Thank you so much for sharing. And I'm sure, like the other speakers, you've kick-started some thoughts. The next session that we host at the end of May will be looking at regional examples of best practice or good practice, and learning from those models that are being originated and innovated elsewhere. We are going to now work through some of the questions that have come through. I know some of them have come through in the chat to everyone, and thank you, Kate, for answering some of those immediate questions. So first of all, Paul, Dan and Kate, if we can start with you, and obviously with the other speakers, if any of this chimes with you, if you'd like to answer or add your perspective on those questions, do chip in, so do take yourself off mute. But firstly, we did have a question in the chat, Kate, which you answered, but for the benefit of everyone else, Paul, where does your team sleep? Where do staff sleep?
Well, so we have two options. Most people, because Paul has epilepsy and there's quite a high risk of seizures, and sometimes we're in the house by ourselves. Some people prefer to sleep downstairs in the front room, which is next to Paul's room, but we do have the option of two rooms upstairs. One of which is, we do a lot of like laundry and things up there, so it's a little bit sleeping in the Amazon sometimes, but mainly downstairs, just because we can be closer to Paul and we can support him better that way.
So we have 2 bedrooms upstairs and a bathroom. So there's a bathroom that's separate, obviously, to Paul's wet room. And you know, it's not like there is a sort of mattress on the floor in front of the wood stove for sleeping when people want to be in the living room. And we are considering other options, like whether to get a sort of a better futon or whatever. But the team are very well, vigilant and also flexible. So there isn't any kind of complaint about that arrangement. And if there was, I think we would sort of manage it.
We'd know about it.
Yeah, we would know about it. And also sometimes, quite often, there are 2-to-1 sleeping overnight. Paul has quite a comprehensive provision that means that, as you can see today, you know, the house is quite full, and you have 2-to-1 support, don't you, most of the time. And the more experienced teams, people are the ones who do the overnights on a solo basis. Because Paul, if you don't mind me saying, sometimes your epilepsy can be very unpredictable, and so we all need to be. I mean, Dan also lives about 200 yards away, and and in the most recent a recent crisis, he and I were here within sort of seconds of each other, weren't we?
Yeah, it was good. We needed to be, actually.
Yeah, we did. Wow. Anyway, so yeah, hope that answers the question. I think flexibility, structure, you know, we have it was really great to hear Chris and Dion's talking about the structure of the provision, because Paul has a very structured provision too. You know, he has comprehensive guidelines, risk assessments, a really, 140-page long care plan. And these are things that are really important because, you know, there's also, if you have that structure, then when things go wrong slightly, the structure can be really helpful in bringing it back on track. And also, there is a danger within a sort of single person service like this of developing a closed culture. And we're very mindful of that, aren't we?
Yeah, isolation from the community and things like that.
But also habits within the team that you know might not be really constructive. So you know, there is a sort of a really open dialogue about that.
Great, thank you, Kate. I have a long list of questions here, so we have ample time, so I'm going to make sure we get through all of these. So we had a question which was how complicated was the setting up of Paul's company? We're thinking that most have had a very creative commissioner, including yours. So there's a few points in there, but yeah, how complicated was it? And I think you summarised that. So yeah, well, commissioner.
Because it was at the beginning of continuing healthcare wanting to move towards a direct payment model, we were the first people who were willing to sort of take it on as a sort of personalised provision in East Sussex. So they said to us, well, what do you need to do that? We think, first of all, it was then the Primary Care Trust, and they were being quite innovative. So they said, we can support you, we can help fund a legal advice to set up the company. You can set up a company in a day. You know, it is really, really easy, actually. The difficulty is what you need to do formally to be recognised and meet the criteria of company status. And that is to have annual management accounts, to have an annual general meeting, and to record and minute meetings with the directors. So myself, Paul's dad, Tony, and his uncle, Graham, are directors of the company. And we will probably embrace other directors as we go. So they're obviously not paid, but that's how the structure goes. And at the moment, continuing healthcare through the personal health budget support the costs of the accountants doing both the payroll every month and pensions and annual accounts.
Thanks. And a question we've had through was, what was the benefit of setting up a company in Paul's name?
Well, we just couldn't think of anything else to call it, could we? And also, you know, one of the things is that we had to sign a contract as a company with the Primary Care Trust to be able to release the funding. So we just established that as it was a move actually from the Independent Living Trust that we'd formed, but they wanted it to be a more legal entity than an Independent Living Trust. So we had to set up a company. I mean, there is a little bit more work involved. And obviously with the personal health budget, you know, there's a lot of monthly reporting on everything, every single thing that's spent has to be accounted for, and I do 4 weekly returns, and all the timesheets and so on need to be done. But we have such a good system now, don't we, that it's actually really very straightforward. Yeah, it is. Hello, Paul. He's listening.
enjoying a mid-morning coffee. How difficult do you find it to employ support workers? And this could be a wider question and a topic for a whole other summit, and we've covered that previously. But crucially, how are these funded? How are support workers funded?
So in our provision, through a personal health budget. So the majority of Paul's personal health budget, it's a very good budget because you have quite complex support needs, Paul. And Paul has 9 staff at the moment. One works 8 hours a week on administration, and she does a lot of the behavioural analysis, which is then submitted to a psychologist that we work with, who then helps facilitate with us periodic service reviews, which happen every 6 weeks, and we discuss the patterns that are going on and how we need to adjust things to improve the situation or how well things are going. And there's lots of standards that we use, like how much bus mileage there is. Paul has a VW that is gradually dying, isn't it, Paul? But we'll get it. It'll keep going for a while yet. And so we monitor mileage, we monitor
instant recording and data input, which helps us to analyse and create strategies to support Paul a little bit better, so we're not doing the wrong things. It's all sort of founded on positive behaviour support strategies.
And so we have these structures so that we have had, it ebbs and flows with support teams. And actually when we were tipped out of continuing healthcare, that actually destabilized the team. We'd had quite a stable team for about 8 years. And then there was about almost 3 years, wasn't it, Dan, of instability. We employed...
sometimes you will employ people that don't work out. They either don't get what you're trying to do because they've been working in, bad care or bad places where they're not getting the right support, the right input. And you don't really know that until someone starts working. So you have to go through quite a bit of pain but eventually you will find a team that just get it and part of within that team. So there's all these roles that are divided up. So everyone is given a sort of a specialist role. So we have a sort of financial administrator, a mentor, an activity planner, a care planner, and so you couldn't possibly do it with just one person on their own. You need to have strength in the team, and you need to build a team that have knowledge and can work together.
And actually, it's not always experience that counts. What really matters is if people have integrity as individuals. If they have integrity and are willing to learn and are sensitive as people, then they work out. If they don't have those, we have had 3 years. It's just stabilized now because we just got a really nice group of people who are just good people. That's the main criteria, and then they can learn, can't they?
You talk a lot about freedom, flexibility, and control. Would you say that a company, as you have set up, is preferable to a personal budget and direct payment?
Well, I mean, we essentially are doing that, but I think the company was just a mechanism, and actually continuing healthcare and adult social care both said to us, we're not going to deal with the company. And we've said, well, tough, because you are dealing with a company, and there is nothing in law that says you shouldn't deal with the company. And actually in the Care Act, it says that an individual can choose how to manage a direct payment or a personal health budget any way they want. And so that is what we have said to each person who says you can't have a company. So I think at the moment it works for us. I think it's a really good formalizing mechanism actually for the team, that they can say they work for the Paul Colley company. That really, I think, is quite important to people because they see it as a really valuable entity that has this set of values that they want to work for.
It's also in its language, so it's person first. You can't get more person first than the Paul Colley company. To it, that's the identity. Okay, we continue to get questions, a flurry of questions. Just to point out, following this event, we'll put a digest together of useful information reference, including the things like the Mental Capacity Act 2008, which was mentioned at the very start, Convention of Human Rights, and the Care Act as well. It's always good to bring it back to legislation. So very basically speaking, who is Paul's landlord?
I am. And actually there was a dispute and it took me about 18 months to persuade Hastings Borough Council that they needed to be able to provide housing benefit to Paul in order to be able to pay me rent, which is what he does. And that helps us financially to be able to manage the mortgage. I mean, it's nowhere near what their payments are, but it helps. And what we had to do for that is that we had to register Paul with the housing register in Hastings Council for 2 years. And in fact, they paid Paul housing benefit when he was living in our own home when we moved out for a couple of years. But it's so they said, well, we can't do. They said we can't give Paul housing benefit because he doesn't have a tenancy agreement. So we created a tenancy agreement and so on. But basically, the only way we could do that is to put him on the register and to show them that there was no alternative, because the housing they came up with for him was so woefully inadequate. It was like upstairs, broken lifts, small. Paul needs, sound control sometimes. And so there's all sorts of ways in which the housing that they came up with was totally inadequate.
We were speaking to the NHS, our regional NHS housing department, and in 2021 they announced a capital fund to support people to either build, develop or make changes to their accommodation so that it could be fit for purpose. So we'll hopefully hear more about that in the months to come, because in addition to the facilities grant that I think you mentioned, Kate, you used to make some changes in Paul's previous home, there seems to be more out there in terms of financial support. We just need to tap into it. Thank you so much. If any of the other speakers want to chip in.
Can I just say, Esther, so like you, Kate, we are, well, I'm now the landlord for Grant and for the tenants next door as well, but that took years and years and years to come about. And it is about teaching the public sector individuals how things run or how things need to run, because as soon as you've got somebody new in, they've read all the policies and procedures and they haven't fully understood it. So I think a lot of the time we are actually having to teach people that work within the public sector how things work. So, but much the same as Kate, Grant had to be on the housing register first, but he now gets housing benefit, as do all the others that live in the house.
Thanks.
Can I just say something? Sorry, Esther. I think Kate said something really important there about having the right to spend your allowance on what you want to use it on. And we got told a very valuable thing many years ago, that we were trying to get Daniel into placement and social services said they would never fund it. And basically we were told that it's as simple as getting Daniel to write a letter in his own words and his own handwriting. And sorry, I thought the screen had frozen. In his own words, his own handwriting, to say where he wants to live and why he wants to live there. And we got the funding. And every time we've had someone new come into our house, they've been told they can't have the funding. It's not appropriate. And every time they've written that letter and we've got it. It's so simple. And I actually asked somebody at social services not so long ago, is it just luck that that's happened, or is it because it becomes a legal document then, and they have said how they wish to live their lives? And he said it's something that we don't spread around, but you're absolutely right.
It's so important that you've mentioned that, Carol, because and I know other people will be thinking this, that if an individual does not have the capacity to do that, then deputyship, as Kate mentioned, Kate is a deputy in personal health and welfare for Paul, and that is another kind of legal tick in the box,
yes,
which would fulfill and leverage what you were just talking about. Again, it's another topic for another session.
Absolutely. But I just wanted to pass it on because it is such a simple thing to do. And even if they can't write, even drawing pictures of the place, something that says that they want to live there, it's just such a huge piece of information, and is so simple, and it works. It's worked every time for us.
I think, I would agree that what's critical is knowing what your rights are, because quite often actually you're dealing with people who don't, who are in positions, and so keeping abreast of legislation as well as fundamental legal rights to choice and a quality of life is really important, and it's come up time and time again. And actually there was a big shift in what we were able to achieve with and for Paul once I did get the deputyships. They were really quite critical, and I have them in both personal welfare and property and affairs, and they have legal weight. And also, because they're administered through the Office of the Public Guardian, if necessary, I can phone up the Office of the Public Guardian and say, listen, I'm having trouble here with someone who is not taking this seriously, this deputyship and what it represents. And I've never had to do that, but they are always saying, do get in touch with us if you need the support.
We've just had a question through which is on this topic. How did you get deputyship for health and welfare?
Well, we just worked through the form, and also I think this is where doing a path is really important, because what the path did was established a community of people around Paul who were invested in him. And that included clinical psychologists. So his psychologist wrote a report that substantiated what our argument was. And just the quality of that kind of input, I think, is really important.
Thank you, Kate. I'm just going to work through some more questions that have been gathered for Carol. Is the landlord and the care still separate from each other?
It is, yes. We've kept it that way. It works. As I say, Barry actually is employed by us as a maintenance, care supporter, odd job man. But yes, it is still very much separated.
And a general question actually that came through, which was, what types of support do support companies offer? So when you're filling in, I think Chris and Dion, you became an independent sole provider. So when you're doing your HMRC and you're writing down your kind of trading description, what comes under that description? Because it's far more than just housing and support.
Okay, so we're not a company at all. So we're just a partnership. So we don't have a, well, it's still a legal structure, but it's just not as formal as a company. In terms of so the question is, what is it?
So it was a very broad question. What types of support do support companies offer?
Okay, so in terms of supporting the guys, well, pretty much anything they need. So it's very individually based. So if somebody needs support with getting up in the morning, they'll be supported with that. If somebody needs support with going to bed at night, they'll get support with that. Unfortunately, sometimes we have to support with people with IT, which is a pet hate of mine. So most of the time I'd send them on to KC Computers, or no, I'd support them to go to somewhere like, you know, like that. So it can be really varied. It can be prompting on, you know, making sure you've brushed your teeth. It might be taking the people to the dentist. Lots of it is hospital appointments and professional appointments, supporting the guys with professional appointments and being advocates for them. Because as everybody probably knows, as soon as we take our guys to a professional and they'll be talking to them, most of the time our guys will just go, yeah, no, but they haven't really fully understood what's being said to them. So it's around unpicking that and delivering what's being asked of them to them in a way that they can understand, so they can properly respond in an informed choice or an informed decision. So yeah, so the support really varies. It's anything and everything that you can think of, really. You know, how do you deal with if you feel unsafe when you're out in the community? It can be as simple as that, of teaching them the skills, even having little support cards. We've made little support cards for our guys that say, if you feel unsafe, do this, you know, and they've got that as a visual prompt whenever they, you know, they need it. So it's pretty much anything and everything. Everything that we take for granted in our own lives, we'll support our guys with. Yeah,
we're exactly the same. You've just reeled off everything that we do as well, and it's we're very much about being personal centered. They don't all have to go to the same gym, they don't all have to go everywhere in groups. They've all had their own individual projects, and some have voluntary jobs, and we assist them with that. Some of them are able to travel more independently, but we teach them the bus routes, and, you know, then we start shadowing them. And as you say, an awful lot of prompting. But we set up a company, we're Brighton Vision Support Services Limited, and we have 4 directors, I'm one of them, and then we have a further 5 members of staff in our team. So yeah, it can be done there's so many possibilities, isn't there, of how to do it, and it works right for, we always have a member of staff sleeping. We're 24-hour care. We're not CQC registered. We tried to be, we couldn't, because we don't actually give personal care, but some of our guys are very vulnerable. We also have one lad that has epilepsy, so we do need to have 24-hour support in. But ours range from, we've got 6, we've got one young lady that has no one-to-one hours, and another one that has 40 odd hours a week. So we really cover a vast range, but our criteria is that they don't need the personal care. So other than that, you know, we're happy to, and as you said, we got nobody sent through the authorities in the first place, but we had so many people knocking on our door saying, you know, oh, this is what we want. And and now the authorities are actually hounding us now. But I think they're very wary in the first place. I don't think local authorities are very keen on these the way we set these up, families getting involved. I don't think they're happy about it. But I think gradually they're starting to see that maybe it is the way forward, because after all, at the end of the day, who knows them best? You know, it's us, isn't it?
I think our local authority actually a few years back decided to buy a load of properties in key areas. I think they took over something like Seaford Library and various other places and created these sort of sheltered homes. But actually we've got one in Sidley, and one of the key things in that home is that you've got sort of learning disabled people together with old people, and they're still isolated.
I know.
But local authority think that that's a great way of doing it.
They love it. I absolutely agree.
Not right.
I absolutely agree with you. You said about the bureaucracy and that. I attend every month, well, I used to, the Learning Disability Forum. And to be honest with you, I haven't done the last few because I'm just sick of wasting my time. It's the same old rubbish that's spouted out every time. And, you know, and the last one I've really just, that's it. I had enough. When they said, how can we retain staff? Pay them more. Give us more funding. Let us pay them more. No, we haven't got the money. So what else can we give them? They need money. It's, you know, that is the answer at the end of the day. And then they turn around and said, well, maybe we could say we could give them an extra day's holiday every year for their birthday. That's more money, isn't it? What is the difference? You know, so it is frustrating. It really is, because I think they put all these hurdles up, and they should actually be helping families to do this. It would take the strain off of the authorities. I think they get better service, they get better money. So, you know,
it's much cheaper. It's much cheaper for them to invest in services like ours. And interesting enough, going back to the staffing question that was posed to Kate, I think staffing is a real issue. It's a real challenge these days. In fact, I sent a table to the local authority only recently, and I'm really hoping that they get the gist of it, which actually showed what the national minimum wage was in 2006 when they were paying, and it was around about £5 an hour, and they were paying PAs, personal assistants, £8.50 an hour. And that £8.50 only changed to something like £9 a couple of years ago.
Yes.
So the actual value, if you look at the national minimum wage from 2006 to now, the value of personal assistance has just gone down. And why would people want to come and work in this field if you get the same as going to stack shelves in a supermarket?
Get more.
Exactly.
Aldi's pay more. Yeah.
And it's less stressful.
Absolutely. Not the responsibility. It's, you know, more social hours, everything about it. Yeah, absolutely. And they keep promising that it's going to be changed, but nothing happens. It's just all the same old hair, isn't it?
Quite an important question has come through in the chat from Sarah Dunn. Who do you share your accommodation ideas with? Who is receptive? Who's listening? Who do you talk to about these ideas?
Anyone? Is it?
Anyone?
Can I just say that again, I would, as I said, I used to attend the learning disability forums, and they do a 5-year strategy, and they wanted volunteers to go on to this to form the next 5-year strategy for people living with learning disabilities. It covers all kinds of areas, you know, shared lives, supported living. I put my hand up, and I was told by the commissioner, yes, I would definitely be on that. And never heard another thing. And when I inquired, they went, oh, we've done it. Sorry, Carol, we forgot. They don't want it. They don't want to share it. They really want to keep us away. But we're talking to other people all the time. I guess you are as well. But it is so daunting for so many people. And they usually fall at the first hurdle because it is made so difficult. Sorry to be negative, but
we have shared the potential for Next Door as a move on project from shared lives to sort of more independence to the what was then the head of learning disability within East Sussex, and he wasn't remotely interested.
No.
People that are generally interested. Interesting enough, we get a lot of inquiries from social services in other areas like London. And all our stuff comes through our website. We have very little in terms of referrals from our local authority.
No, agreed.
I would say
they like us.
we but we had some referrals. We had some sort of mental health referrals, didn't we? Which
yes, same here.
With learning the sort of idea that those two things were sort of compatible.
was
Yeah.
just a bit crazy. I mean, one of them was for someone I was in school with who had like developed, you know, lots of issues around drugs. Which just
Yes, that's one we get on a regular basis. Yeah, you're absolutely right. Yeah, they just don't understand what we're doing.
It doesn't gel at all, does it?
No, not at all.
I would say that there is a lot of understanding and knowledge by senior commissioners of our provisions, these kinds of provisions. And as you say, if they really wanted to roll them out and learn, they could be here. Where are they this morning?
Exactly.
Are there any here in this meeting? I wonder.
I haven't seen any, Kate, and I did have a quick nose.
This is a summer series which has a build-up. So the first 2 sessions are around celebrating and showcasing and platforming good models. Hence why we're recording this for dissemination after the event. There's a question that's come through. We have 10 minutes left. This is specifically for, I guess, Kate, your situation. So someone has asked, how would these models work if a person needs 2-to-1, 24/7 care, including complex health needs and personal care?
Well, I would say that that is the situation here. And Paul has very complex support needs. He's left the room, so I can say that confidentially without embarrassing him. But he, you know, he has quite profound epilepsy and behaves as a challenge, and he needs 2-to-1 support actually all the time. And so one of the arguments we've made recently to get an uplift in his provision is to be able to pay the team good hourly rates. And so the hourly rates have become very competitive, I think, comparatively. And I think it does work with someone like Paul, who has very complex health and support needs. Depends whether there's something you're thinking of, the person who asked the question, whether that's something in particular. But everything that we have here is probably more, is replicable in a health setting, an in-bed health setting. We have all of the structures and protocols and safeguards and support that is needed for someone with very complex and high support needs.
Thank you, Kate. And then lastly, the final question. Speakers this morning have talked about a time when they may not be around. How do they see the future of the homes and support teams they have built?
Well, we're very positive. Obviously, there's only so much you can do. We've tried to tie it up as best we can in wills and so forth. As I say, we've done a company, formed a company. Hopefully they will continue on. Yeah, it still keeps us awake at night, I can't lie, because who knows what's going to happen in the future with benefits and fundings and whatever. But we feel we have gone as far as we can to safeguard Daniel's future and his friends. So as I say, we've set it up, we've put it into a trust so that if Daniel was to meet his maker first, it just doesn't stop then. You know, it's got to carry on. That house will carry on as a house for people with learning disabilities. So we hope we've done enough. That's what we can say.
Yeah,
We
that's the same.
Yeah.
Thank you. We are coming towards the end. We have had a question which was about setting up something similar in Brighton, how easy, how difficult. Hopefully this has given everyone some fuel to the fire, some ideas to get started. We will be rounding up some of the key information and resources and signposting to send out at a later date for you to then begin your own journey if this is relevant for you. In the meantime, do get in touch with us at Project Artworks. Sarah Dunn, who's sitting over here to my right, is taking over leading the support collective, but hopefully you'll still see my face around and maybe even at a future Housing Summit session. Thank you so much to our speakers this morning for your time and your insight. It has been truly wonderful to hear how you've gone about creating person-centred housing and support and quality of life, really. And full lives. And thank you on behalf of the Support Collective. Our next session will be on the 30th of May, and that will look at more regional examples of good practice. And we've even got Julie from Get a Life, who I know is on the call this morning, from Coventry, our friends in Coventry, who we've met quite a few along the way, with the Turner Prize being hosted in Coventry last year, as well as a model of home ownership, supported mortgage home ownership, which will be presented at the next session. So put the date in your diary, the 30th of May, 11 till 1, and we'll be in touch with more information on that. But yeah, thank you ever so much for joining us this morning.
Thank you.